What is up, guys? It's your boy Deep Cactus, and today Bungie just dropped a massive new update detailing the weapon changes coming to Destiny 2 with the launch of Season of the Deep. 17 different exotic weapons are going to be impacted by these changes, and so let's get started. Now, first things first, Bungie talks about weapon reticles and some big changes coming next season. So, in the background is actually gameplay provided by Bungie, and this developer is using a variety of different weapons with different perks, and you can actually see the both ADS reticles and the hipfire reticles change depending on, for example, if heating up is active on the one SMG, you can see the memento mori shots being like displayed with the Ace of Spades and stuff like that. So that's very cool. Bungie says specifically, we've rebuilt the reticles for the following weapon types so that they move more visibly at high FOV while still conveying the current state of weapon accuracy, fusion rifles, hand cannons, sidearms, and trace rifles. So we plan to update other weapon reticles in a similar way in future releases. Shotgun reticles also now scale with FOV, such that the reticle will closely match the pellet spread regardless of your selected field of view, and note that as of Lightfall, they dynamically scale with shotgun pellet spread angle changes. So, moving on from there, for charge meters involving reticles, fusion rifle charge and sword guard energy are critical aspects to these weapons. So, fusion rifles now have a charge meter under the reticle, and sword reticles now show the current sword guard energy. Just a lot of things that's going to help you more easily decide what to do in a given moment of gameplay. In addition, they have experimental aim down sights reticles. So, they say our hipfire reticles are built with technology that lets them scale with weapon auto aim and accuracy, but our aim down sights reticles are typically hand built for each specific weapon and don't necessarily show this information. We've been experimenting with an approach that keeps the hand built aesthetic of a weapon sight or scope, but replaces the center crosshair or red dot with a variant of the hipfire reticle. We've decided to get this into your hands and see how it feels in the live game before looking into this type of reticle further. And that's what you saw in the gameplay. The Shaira's Wrath SMG, it now has an aim down sights reticle that reacts to the weapon's accuracy and auto aim state. That is very cool. But in addition, they have a section on custom exotic weapon reticles. So, the specific additions to the exotic weapons are, first of all, the charge meter added to exotic weapons whose base weapon type doesn't typically have a charge meter, so Devil's Ruin, Salvation's Grip, and Grand Overture. Next up, perk counter shows pips for perked shots, so the Quicksilver Storm grenade count, the Ace of Spades memento mori shot count, which we saw, the Lumina Noble rounds shot count, the Traveler's Chosen gathering light stacks, and then we have perk progress meter shows perk buildup for the Manticore. They also have perk active shows when the exotic perk is active, so the Hawkmoon, Ager's Scepter, Terabot, Touch of Malice, Cryosthesia, and Trinity Ghoul, and lastly the charge meter and perk counter for the Vex Mythoclast. So again, guys, when you're using any of those exotics, the actual hipfire reticle will display just very important information about that weapon's exotic perk. In addition, moving on from there, something very cool, as you can see right here, you can now 3D inspect weapons. That's right, in Season of the Deep, you can rotate weapons around when taking a look at them, which is very, very cool. But after that, guys, Bungie is adding full auto melee. So they say after the popularity of the full auto firing setting, they're also adding it to melee. So essentially you can just hold down the melee button and you will melee as fast as possible. You don't need to actually spam anymore. Moving on from there, guys. Finally getting on to the weapon buffs and nerfs, firstly we have weapon archetypes affected. So for bows, the Tyranny of Heaven's stats were always weirdly low, so they're upping those. Moving on from there, for submachine guns, aggressive submachine guns have surged in PvP. They need to be brought back into banned according to Bungie. So what's happening is that they've reduced the base damage from 15 down to 14, but they've increased the precision hit multiplier multiplier from 1.45 to 1.5. So crit damage goes from 21.8 to 21. Now, in addition, for the Immortal specifically, they've reduced the base range value by 10 to bring it more in line with other SMGs of its archetype. So, in general, you are going to have to get more precision shots if you want to get that optimal time to kill. So we'll have to see if this has a real effect on the meta. In my personal opinion, I doubt it. The Immortal's still going to be cracked out of its mind. Moving on from there, for sniper rifles. So, they're going to increase the PvE damage by 10%. And they say, note, the Izanagi's Burden Honed Edge perk shots don't receive this buff. All other exotic sniper rifles receive this buff as written. So, a little bit unfortunate because obviously the Izanagi's Burden is like the go-to heavy-hitting PvE sniper. But this is, make no mistake, a pretty big change, guys. Bungie buffed snipers by 20% back with the Shadow Keep expansion, and they really gained popularity, especially because the Garden of Salvation raid had pretty much all of the boss fights require long-range weapons. For some reason, Bungie didn't like this, and they nerfed it by that 20%. So they took away the entirety of that buff, and they've been in a weird spot ever since. So a 10% damage increase is actually pretty significant. Not to mention, this is on the heels of a recent massive buff to rapid-fire frame snipers. They get something like 40 to 50% more reserve ammo from a recent buff. So now they're going to be doing more damage on top of that. Keep an eye on rapid-fire snipers. Next up, guys, for scout rifles, long arm was inadvertently receiving the damage bonus versus miners for exotics, so we've addressed that. It still receives the scout rifle PvE buff from the Season 20 mid-season balance update. Now, moving on from there, exotic weapons. Here we go, guys. So first of all, the Eyes of Tomorrow. This is the raid exotic from the Deepstone Crypt. So now, killing 4 targets with a missile volley will refund 1 ammo. Oh my god. So basically Gambit is ruined, right? I mean, you just get 1 rocket in the Eyes of Tomorrow, you wait until the enemies spawn, you're 100% gonna get 4 kills, and then you kill the next group of enemies and the next group, and you basically have infinite ammo. Like, seriously, can you not just use this rocket launcher now to clear out an entire activity, always getting those 4 kills with this rocket? Like, that seems insane. Moving on from there, however, guys, we have the Graviton Lance. So, they've increased the rounds per minute from 257 to 300, but they've reduced the burst delay by 20%, and it now matches the Revision Zero's Haka heavy rounds rate of fire, and they've rebalanced the damage per shot. So they've increased the first shot damage from a body 9.5 up to 19, and crit 15.7 all the way to 31.4, but they've decreased the second shot damage from a 35.6 body to 25.6 and a 58.7 crit down to 42. So essentially the 2 different shots are more balanced, not gonna have one shot doing way more damage than the other shot. Overall, guys, like, honestly, this pulse feels pretty good after the buff in PvE even, so this seems to be a buff more specialized towards PvP, but we're gonna have to wait and see. Moving on from there, the Jade Rabbit. So they say it's a strong PvP scout, but it was difficult to keep track of the state of the exotic perk, so they've added a buff text to show when Fate of All Fools increased body shot damage is active, and quickly hitting 3 critical hits now refunds 3 shots instead of 1. So you can really easily just go infinite with this weapon. That's pretty interesting. Moving on from there, the flying around with the Manticore SMG is some silly fun, but they wanted to make it more rewarding. So they've increased the catalyst damage resistance from tier 3 to tier 4. So you're going to be extremely tanky when floating around, and they've increased the movement speed during the hang time, and activating the catalyst perk through an airborne kill or sustained damage now partially refills the magazine. Now moving on from there, guys, for the Lumina hand cannon, they've increased the noble rounds cap from 5 to 6. Then for the Heart Shadow Exotic Sword from the Duality Dungeon, so the damage increase now activates quicker while invisible after 0.25 seconds instead of 1 whole second, and the Heart Shadow now weakens upon dealing any damage while the damage increase is active. So I think previously you had to do a heavy attack in order to weaken, but now you just, as long as you kind of are invisible and get those first attacks and get that damage increase, you instantly weaken as well, which is a lot more ammo efficient, not having to use those heavy attacks. So that's honestly not bad. Now moving on from there, the Worldline Zero Exotic Sword. So the sprinting heavy attack can now be chained into itself once. So sword guard energy cost from each sprinting heavy attack reduced from 100% to 50%, and they've decreased the damage from an individual sprinting heavy attack by 25% to compensate. So instead of one big, heavy attack, you can now go one and then another right after it. Now moving on from there, the Sweet Business Exotic Auto Rifle. So it now fires explosive rounds every 20 shots and fewer shots when fully spun up. Okay, that seems kind of insane, especially if those explosive rounds increase the damage like a normal explosive round on a hand cannon, like that does 10 to 15% more damage. Will this also be the case? Pretty interesting. Moving on from there, the Legend of Acrius Shotgun. They've increased the total ammo from 12 to 16, and they've increased the maximum projectile distance from 9 meters to 12 meters. Is that thing going to be schlapping in PvP again? We'll have to see. However, next up we have the Tommy's Matchbook Exotic Auto Rifle. So, the catalyst has been updated. While overheated, sustained fire scorches your target. Every 5 shots applies 14 plus 7 with Ember of Ashes equipped, Scorch stacks. Alright. Then, the No Time to Explain's drone wouldn't work against barrier champion shields when anti-barrier was in effect, so they've updated the drone to work with anti-barrier, so it can now break a champion's shields. They've updated the drone to work with Feeding Frenzy from the Catalyst, and this also resolves an issue where the feedback for Feeding Frenzy would always play when the players spawned and then never again. So just general updates to the No Time. Moving on from there, for the Skyburner's Oath, they've increased the Scorch stacks from 3 to 5 and 5 to 10 with Ember of Ashes equipped. So you just get like guaranteed Scorches like every single shot with the Skyburners. That's actually kind of nuts. Then for the Salvation's Grip, they've reworked it to have 2 firing modes. The charged shot creates a pattern of stasis crystals where the number of crystals is no longer dependent on the charge time, and the uncharged shot is just a normal grenade launcher shot which does more damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets. And they've added a new perk that reloads the magazine from reserves when you quickly shatter at least 3 crystals with the uncharged shot. So guys, shattering actually does a ton of damage. Like, you can essentially one-phase Riven if you have a bunch of Stasis Titans doing their supers in the right spots and getting a ton of shatter damage. So now with the Salvation's Grip, being able to just do a heavy charge shot and then a few normal shots to shatter all those crystals, and then going back to a heavy shot, going back to normal to shatter, and alternating between tons of crystals to shatter and then normal shots could actually result in a pretty significant amount of DPS. Now moving on from there, the Bad Juju Exotic Pulse Rifle, they fixed an issue that was causing the weapon to recoil like an auto rifle, making it harder to control. The recoil pattern will now be similar to other pulse rifles, so it's going to be, recoiling a lot better. Moving on from there, the Fighting Lion's damage against red bars spiked to massive levels due to a recent bug. We've addressed this, but note it still receives the 40% damage bonus for exotic primary weapons, so they just fixed that issue. Now, After that, guys, the Thunderlord surged in popularity, finally a good machine gun, but they say it shipped with a bug that allowed lightning strikes at a higher frequency than was intended against divinity bubbles. We've addressed that. Why? Note that regular crits are not affected. Okay, so basically it's a little bit worse with divinity. Moving on from there, the Winter Bite. So the impact damage has been removed and redistributed to the detonation damage. The self-damage scaling has been tuned to account for the increased damage of the detonation. So that was, you could use that thing to one-phase raid bosses and stuff like that. It was definitely glitched. It wasn't that consistent, so they did some changes. Now moving on from there, guys, for perks. So Fragile Focus, they say, is fairly potent, but the perk deactivator was very unforgiving, so the bonus now lasts until shield pop and returns when the shield generates to 100%. So you can actually now take some damage with Fragile Focus. Only when your shield is actually fully depleted will it go away. That's like actually a pretty significant increase. Now moving on from there, Thresh, Demolitionist, and Pugilist have always granted increased energy on shotgun, fusion rifle, and sniper rifle kills, but Glaives missed out on that bonus until now. So it grants increased energy to glaive projectile kills, the same as the rest. Okay, cool. Reconstruction has been simplified under the hood so that we can place the perk on more weapons without exceeding perk budgets. So the result is a slight change to the timing of the perk, and the base perk is 4 seconds and enhanced is 3.5. So shoot to loot. Honestly, a very underrated perk, super good in high level content, but it's being updated to now pick up Orbs of Power. Currently, this only works on direct hits. The ability for the orbs to be picked up with a weapon detonations will be added in a future patch. So unfortunately, for example, on the newest Hung Jury Scout Rifle, you can actually get Shoot to Loot plus Kinetic Tremors. And so for ammo, when you trigger Tremors, it literally like sucks up all the ammo in that explosive area. We thought it would affect orbs, and it will in the future, but again, not directly next season. Still, Shoot to Loot, because of that, is getting a lot better. Moving on from there, Bungie has a section called The Future. So, we're in the process of redesigning how Zoom interacts with damage falloff. Weapons with that weapon's type standard zoom value, example for SMGs, this would be a 14 zoom stat or 1.4 times magnification, will be unaffected by this specific change. But weapons with lower than standard zoom values for their archetype will have their damage fall off buffed, and weapons with a higher than standard zoom value will have their damage fall off reduced. Note that this will only apply to damage fall off. To avoid negatively impacting weapon feel, bonuses to aim assist, accuracy, and recoil will still apply. We will also be having a pass on the base damage falloff ranges for several types of weapons to make sure that weapon types that previously relied on having above standard zoom to be competitive are not left behind. There's also a big sword update coming with the goal of making guarding substantially more valuable. In the more distant future, we're also working on an update to sparrows that will allow players to use their favorites instead of always on time without touching the always on time itself. So hopefully just speed increase to sparrows. That would be nice. I have all these cool exotic sparrows that I'm never going to use because it feels so bad to get on a slower sparrow. In any event, guys, those are the changes. Some pretty cool buffs, some pretty weird nerfs. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, found it informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.